Do you want to?
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Global Scholarship Program Fireside Chat, hosted by One African Child. One African Child is a youth-led organization that is transforming education through opportunities and resources that are necessary for young people to become agents of change in our local communities. So today's session is part of our Global Scholarship Program, which is an initiative aimed at raising scholarships and funding opportunities for higher education for African students. We believe in not just investing in students, we believe in investing in the future of Africa. But before we begin, I would like us to introduce ourselves in the chat box. You can share your name, where you're joining us from, and one thing you're passionate about. So you can start doing that in the chat box. And also to ensure we all have a smooth and enjoyable session, all microphones have been muted. This will help us to reduce background noise and just ensure that we can hear our speakers loud and clear. So in today's program, we have not just one, but two luminaries joining us. Our esteemed speakers will be shedding light on incredible opportunities that are available throughout the program. And with us today, we have Chineye Uwaduleke and Diane Weiss Young. So Chineye Uwaduleke currently holds the position of Education Specialist at the United States Consulate General in Lagos, Nigeria. Previously, she was involved in the management of various US government exchange programs. She is a true champion of education with an extensive wealth of experience. And then Ms. Young currently serves as the Regional Educational Advising Coordinator for West Africa within EducationUSA. So let us give a warm welcome to Chineye Uwaduleke as I hand over to her. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for that very kind introduction. I don't know. I feel like my supervisor, Diane Wise Young, should go ahead and speak first. Miss Diane.
Thanks, Chineye. I am delighted to be here, and as was said, I'm the regional manager now, is my title, for EducationUSA, and I work with 22 countries and 27 centers throughout West and Central Africa. You are about to hear from one of our true experts about graduate school and the application process. It's complicated, but it is also one that could afford you an amazing opportunity to study in the US at one of the more than 2,000 graduate schools in the United States. So that's all I'll say, and I'll be around throughout the presentation. So Chineye, back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for that your kind words. So good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name has been said. I will be speaking on the US graduate school application process. And I just wanted to share a bit about me before I delve into my presentation, just to let you know I am kind of like you, or I was like you many years ago. I was born and I was raised in Lagos, Nigeria, went to the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, graduated with the first class in foreign languages and literatures. My main language was French. I completed my NYSC at a nursery and primary school in Benue State. Also went on to do a fully funded Master's of Public Administration in the US. Got married the year of my graduation. I've been working ever since then, over 18 years with the US Consulate General, and 10 of those years have been as an educational advisor, as an EducationUSA advisor to be precise. I consider myself a lifelong learner, so I am very humbled and honored to be here because I feel like I'm also going to be here, not just teaching you guys what I know about studying the US, but also learning from you as you ask your questions. So thank you very much to the One African Child Foundation for the invitation and the honor to present. So what will I cover today? I'll attempt to talk, I've already introduced myself. I'll talk to you about EducationUSA and what we do there, why study in the US. I'll give you 3 of our 5-step process. on how to study in the US, because the last two steps would take a bit of time, and time is not on our side today. So I'll attempt to do justice to the first three. And then I'll talk to you also about opportunities that you can get if you want to study in the US. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So what is EducationUSA? We're a US Department of State supported network and your official source when it comes to US higher education information. What we do at all our centers is to provide international students with accurate, comprehensive, and current information about how to apply to US colleges and universities. I know my audience today is a graduate audience, but we also work with undergraduate students as well. In the EducationUSA network, we have over 500 advising 550 advisors in 430 advising centers in 180 countries and territories around the world. And what we do in Nigeria is that we have 6 centers at the embassy in Abuja, the consulate in Lagos, and at American Corners in Calabar, Ibadan, Jos, and Kano. So if you're based in Nigeria and you're looking for additional information beyond today, I encourage you to visit any of these centers to learn more about studying the US. And our website will have the exact location of these centers. Now, why study in the US? As my regional manager mentioned, we have over 1,700 accredited universities. I think it's close to 2,000 now. So my presentation is a bit dated. There are over 1,800 majors or fields of study that students can engage in, study at, focus on. There is the flexibility when it comes to what you want to study and what you can mix and match and study and not study. There's also a very diverse community that you're going to be studying with. So I know that there are many people that are looking at different countries in terms of where you want to study. I suspect that America is probably not the only country on your radar, but the beauty about America is that it's a melting pot, right? And so you're going to be meeting and studying with people from different countries, different walks of life, different backgrounds, and all of that. And you also have access to world-class education. For those of you who are really focused and hung up on rankings of universities, you will find out that any ranking that's what it's sold will have most of the top universities in the world located in the United States. Now, what are some of these opportunities that I talked to you about? You have the opportunity to gain practical experience. And that's very key in today's changing world. I don't think anyone wants to go to school and just listen to theory and more theory and more theory. People are looking for practical experience that can be transferred to a workplace or to a business. So in the United States, every international student would have the opportunity to do curriculum practical training, which is sort of like an internship that you can do off campus while school is not in session. And when you graduate, you can do what's called optional practical training, which allows you to work for up to 3 years if you're a STEM student, up to 1 year if you're not a STEM student in your field of study, as long as you can find a job. Many students work on campus. In fact, my on-campus job as a graduate student was what gave me some of the experience I needed when I was applying to work with the US government almost 20 years ago. Students can work for up to 20 hours a week, even though you're paid minimum wage. I also count that as really important experience to have on your resume, because now you're graduating and people are asking you for 2, 3, 4, 5 years experience. And where do you want to get that from? You can get that from working on campus. And also, especially for those in STEM fields, but even for those in non-STEM fields, there's a lot of research opportunities. There are a lot of research opportunities at the graduate level. I have graduate students who are attending conferences, publishing papers with their professors, and basically getting their name out there, even whilst they're still students, even when they have not yet graduated. So those are the benefits of studying in the US. Now, when do you start applying? 12 to 18 months in advance. In the United States, there are typically, or you will find that most universities have 2 different start dates. Some would start in the fall, which is usually August or September of every year. Some would start in the spring, which is usually around January, February of every year. Now, some schools may not have a spring semester start date, but I can guarantee you that almost every institution will have a fall semester start date. And when we say it takes 12 to 18 months, 12 to 18 months is not I want you to really take it seriously, because that's how long it takes you to research your options, to think of how to finance your studies, to complete a solid application. You could probably do it in less than 12 to 18 months, but I would say that it will not be as strong of an application as if you really take your time to do all that research and apply to the kinds of schools that would admit you. Now, some application timelines I want you to think about, and I try to use dates that we can sort of all identify with. Think early. So when I say that school starts in the fall, August or September, I'm not talking about August or September of this year. As I'm speaking to you, I hope I'm speaking to people who are thinking of starting in 2025, right? So if you're thinking of starting in 2025, we're in the month of February. This is a wonderful time. You have at least 12 to 18 months to apply and put together a solid application. But then you're not applying like someone who's going to start in 2025, because your deadlines are this year. So when I say apply early, if you want to stand out, if you want to know when to stand out, you want to apply by Nigeria's Independence Day, which is October 1. That's when a lot of students I see who are getting full funding are applying by. If you feel like you can't meet that deadline, then apply by American Thanksgiving, which is usually around the third Thursday in November. That's when you've put together, you've taken the standardized test, university, you have some good work experience to show for it. That's when people are applying by. Or by Christmas, okay? So I always tell my students, before you eat that Christmas chicken, before you go have fun for Christmas, make sure you've turned in all your applications. Yes, you're starting school in fall of 2024, or 2025 rather, but by this year that we are in, this 2024 that we're in, you must have turned in your applications if you want to be considered for funding. Most people, however, apply regular decision by the deadline that the institution gives. So if an institution tells you that their deadline is April 1, some people will sort of chill and relax, and that's the most common decision plan. Nothing wrong with that, especially if you're not ready. But I would say that if you want to stand out, these are the things to do. You want to apply early. They say the early bird catches the worm, and I completely believe that. Now, what are some basic requirements when it comes to doing a master's or a PhD in the United States? Most schools are looking for students who have graduated with at least 4 years of a bachelor's degree. I know that there are some bachelor's degree programs now that are 3 years, and some, say that, yeah, you can finish in 3 years what you can do in 4 years. You don't need 4 years. But the minimum schools are looking for is 4 years. Now, if you enter through direct entry, which is a thing in Nigeria, you still want to show whatever results you got from that your first year, plus the 3 years that you spent in the university. Schools are also looking at your GPA. I know there was a question about, does GPA really matter? Schools want to know that you can do graduate level work. So if you've not done well at the undergraduate level and you don't have ample work experience, relevant work experience, then they want to be sure that you're ready for graduate level work. So they're going to be looking at your GPA to see if you have at least a 3.0 GPA on a 4-point scale, which would be translated roughly to about 3.75 on a 5-point scale, or a 2-1, a high 2-1, okay? If you've made a second class lower, I encourage you to go and do a postgraduate diploma, a PhD. If you've gone to a polytechnic instead of a 4-year university, and you have what's called the HND, I encourage you to make sure that it's a HND with an upper credit or a distinction. And in addition to that, to go get what's called the credential evaluation. Many of you have heard of WES or ECE. Those are credential evaluation companies that can help you convert your GPA from a Nigerian equivalent to a US equivalent. Now, what are the 3 steps I talked about? These are steps that, it's a 5-step process, but I'm just going to focus on the first 3 today. These are steps that are proven to help you when you want to study in the US, and you want to do it in these steps. So step number 1 is to research your options. Step number 2 is to finance your studies. And step number 3 is to complete your application. And I'm going to explain how to research your options. So in step number 1, when you're thinking of graduate school in the US, there are a number of criteria to consider. Most people, obviously, the first thing they do is think about what they want to study. To chill out, you're going to school. So obviously you want to make sure that the schools that you're looking at or considering have the program of study you're interested in. The second thing you want to think about is the admissions requirements, kind of standardized tests. If they require standardized tests, is there a certain cutoff, number that they're looking at? If you are applying to certain programs, is there a GPA they require? I know I said 3.0, but I've seen some schools on their website say they will take as low as 2.9 or 2.8. So those are things for you to look out for as you research your options. Because if you don't have a number of students at the average GPA of students that they admitted for the last academic year was 3.2 or 3.5, and you're looking at your GPA and it doesn't really measure up, these are things for you to consider before you actually throw in your application. You also want to consider, do they have funding? Many schools will put on their website the fact that they have funding and what type of funding they have and what programs it's available for. So it's very important for you to check this out. If you're thinking of a PhD as opposed to a master's, you definitely want to focus on the faculty profiles. Have they published? Are they still publishing? Is their publication in line with what you are interested in studying? Okay, because these faculty members are potential supervisors for you when you're thinking of a PhD program. You also want to think about professional accreditation. Is this school that you're applying to accredited? What's their reputation for your field of study? I'll give you an example. Everyone knows Harvard. But when you think of Harvard, you don't think, biomedical engineer from Harvard. You'd probably think Harvard Law School, Harvard Medical School, Harvard Business School, Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Those are niches that they've carved for themselves in the world. When you think of MIT, you're probably thinking scientist, computer scientist, engineer, things of that nature. When you think of MIT, you're not thinking of law. You're not thinking of mass communication. You're not thinking of certain fields. So what is the reputation of that school you are applying to for the program you are considering? Those are things to consider. Don't get hung up on the name of the school, because frankly speaking, we can't all be admitted by Harvard, Yale, Princeton, MIT, and Stanford. Get hung up on whether that particular institution you're applying to is excellent for that major or that field that you're going into. Okay, how competitive is the program? Where are they located? Schools that are based or located mostly in the Midwest tend to have a lower cost of living. So that might be something that you want to think about, especially if you're thinking of maybe going with your family or, paying by yourself, okay? What are career and research opportunities that are available for you as a student? And what research facilities are available as well? And what's the curriculum structure? What are you going to be learning? I always say, as a graduate student, you want to open the website of the school, look at the course curriculum. What are you going to be learning? All those things are really detailed. If you look at that curriculum and it doesn't look like something you want to learn, you need to be able to find a school that will give you what you want to learn. When I was applying to graduate school, I saw, so my master's was in public administration. Initially, it was in international policy studies. And there was a lot of information about policy studies of Asia, of Europe, everywhere but Africa. But I was really interested in Africa, right? So when I got on campus, I made sure that I worked with professors who were doing something on Africa. And that's how I was able to fulfill my own need for why I went to graduate school. So it's very important for you to do that research and make sure that you're applying to schools that can help you. So these are a few websites that I encourage you to check out. You can take a screenshot that can help you sort of narrow your search, right? So 1,700 schools or 2,000 schools, there's no way for you to apply to all 2,000 of them. You can't even probably apply to 200, but you can probably narrow your search to about 40, 50, and then now start deciding, okay, which 5 to 10 am I going to actually turn in an application to? So these are some websites that help you do that. So I'll give you a second. All right. Now, step number 2 is to finance your studies. US studies cost on average about $35,000 a year. Some schools and some programs cost as much as $150,000 a year. I had a student several years ago who was admitted to Northwestern University for a PhD in mechanical engineering. His I-20 cost was $135,000 US for 1 year. okay? There's some MBA programs that cost as much as 150. So that tells you that it's not cheap. But if you're thinking of a PhD, there's more funding than for a master's. If you're thinking of an academic program, as opposed to a professional program like an MBA or a public health or law or journalism, there's more funding for those who are intending to go into academia. There's more funding for those in the sciences than in the social sciences or humanities. Research and doctoral universities have much more money to throw around than master's institutions because they're receiving grants from different organizations and they need to use those grants to pay graduate students, or they use those grants to pay graduate students. So I'm just giving you ideas of how you can finance your studies and what kinds of schools to look out for when you're applying. You must go and build your research experience, your teaching experience, your academic potential, because this increases your chance for funding. If you've been out of school for a long time, you haven't done anything academic related, and your work experience, is not relevant to what it is you're thinking of going for graduate school, then it's a bit difficult for a school to give you their money, because what are the chances that you're going to succeed, right? So these are things for you to start building on now and October, November, December. Most programs don't offer funding until the second year. I would say not most, but many programs. So don't be discouraged if you're admitted to a program and they tell you, oh, we don't have funding for you right now. They might have funding for you in subsequent years. But one thing I would say is when you're applying to schools, when you're turning in that application, make sure you are applying for whatever funding that they say they have at the same time as when you're applying for admission. The mistake a lot of people make is to apply for admission, be admitted, then start looking for funding. No. On the website of the school, you will see whether the school has funding. When you communicate to the graduate coordinator or the professors, you will know whether they have funding. And if they don't have the funding that you think you need, then there's no need to throw in your application there. Now, what is funding based on? A strong and competitive application. Schools are looking at the whole application you've submitted. So most times they practice what's called the holistic review. They're reading your letters of recommendation to see what professors have said about you. They're looking at your CV or resume to see what you have accomplished. They're reading your statement of purpose to understand if you even have a strong why, what you hope to accomplish, and what you would do with a degree in this field. Secondly, your academic achievements. Usually, schools will give you funding based on what you have achieved academically. So I said I was fully funded. And I remember when I submitted my certificates, my degree result, my transcripts, as well as my GRE scores, that was enough to get me the maximum merit-based funding that the school had, which was $10,000, okay? So sometimes your GPA counts and it matters and it carries some weight. So don't feel it's not just about the GPA. Yes, the GPA could give you additional funding that you may not have known existed. Your work experience, any work, research, or teaching experience that you have, make sure that you are putting it on your CV, your resume, and make sure you're highlighting it, your statement of purpose, especially when it's related to that field of study you're interested in studying or going into. Schools, more often than not, will interview you, maybe once or twice or even 3 times, to determine if you're a good fit for their program. And what are they asking you about? That work experience that you say that you have. Sometimes funding is based on whether the school even has funding to start with. I've seen a lot of students being admitted, but then the school will tell them, unfortunately, we don't have the funds to bring you in, but we like your application. You're an excellent student, but we just don't have the funds. So availability of funds is very important. And how can you overcome this? By making sure you're connecting with professors, you're checking out their website again. I can't even overemphasize this. People who are already current students there can give you insider information on if this professor just got a grant or if the school just has received funding that they can use to fund students. And then there are some institutions that have priorities. Look, you're researching on one particular field, but they are interested in another particular field. And your SOP, your entire application is saying that you must be in field X. But what they're really focused on and what they want to push is field Y. that's something for you to know as well. What are some ways for you to pay for graduate school? You want to secure a graduate school scholarship or fellowship. Like I said, I was fully funded. My funding came partially merit-based, based on my GPA and my GRE. But I also received a fellowship that was external that helped me for graduate school. Okay, so I'll talk about that more in detail, but there are fellowships out there, especially women in STEM. I wasn't in STEM, but I received, funding for grad school. So especially for women in STEM, there's a lot of funding going around. So I would encourage you to please look out for all of those. And you can find that on the school's website. You can work for the graduate school via assistantships, teaching assistantships, graduate assistantships, research assistantships. In fact, when you open a school's website, the word you want to be looking for in their search engine is the word assistantships. If you can find assistantships, then you know that the school actually has money for you as the graduate students. Okay, they might limit the assistantships to PhD students as opposed to master's students, but that's something for you to check out before you throw in your application. I've had students get their employer to pay for graduate school, especially those who are going for business or finance related programs, because those programs typically, your return on investment is really high. So when you graduate, you're sure that you're going to be making tons of money. So a lot of companies want to send you to school so that you can come back and give them maybe 2-3 years of work before you go on to do whatever you want. Family members can also help you for grad school, and you can also borrow. We at EducationUSA don't advocate for borrowing because it's a double-edged sword. You could get your visa with it. You may not get your visa. Consultants will always want to know how you're going to pay back. If you're not earning in hard currency, how you're going to pay back. And it's a valid question. It's a valid concern. So I wouldn't jump on borrowing as my first option. I would think of other things. Now, let me explain graduate assistantships. Graduate assistantships simply mean that you're working for the university. It's a job, okay? And in exchange, they're going to be giving you certain benefits. Most schools will cover your tuition in full. They will give you a monthly stipend, and some schools will also throw in health insurance. So basically, you're working for the school and you're getting an education, quote unquote, for free. Many schools will have a teaching assistantship, which is awarded by the department. You need to show that you're proficient in spoken English, very important, because you're going to be talking to Americans or teaching in a classroom. They need to see that you can communicate well. And they're probably going to be looking at your TOEFL results or your IELTS or whatever English proficiency test. They also want to see that you have teaching experience. So these are things that would help you. A graduate assistantship, usually awarded by the graduate school. As a recipient, you'll be doing administrative type work. As a research assistant, you would be working with your professor, okay? You're assisting them on their research projects. It's contributing to your own thesis research, but usually it's awarded by professors. So when you're on LinkedIn or you're on Twitter or X and you're engaging with professors, you're trying to gauge and see if they have any assistantships they have to offer you if you get into university. Some tips to stand the best chance: don't apply to only one program. Apply to at least 5 that have the most funding, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket. Communicate with the graduate coordinators and the professors as often as you can. That means you must know how to write an email. Your email must look professional. Your email address must be professional. Your email signature should show that you are serious and someone that they should be dealing with, right? If you're taking standardized tests, if your school requires that you take standardized tests, make sure you score as high as you can. Some schools, standardized tests are optional, so don't get hung up on, should I take a test, should I not take a test? If you do step 1, which is research your options, you will know whether a test is required or not. Then in your application, make sure you're connecting your work experience with your intended degree. You can't say that, for example, I studied French, I was going into the development space, and I had interned at an NGO, I had done my NYSC and done some projects in Benue State. So my entire application, I couldn't use French because I wasn't going to France. My entire application, I was talking about the work I had done. And I was saying, this is why I want to go to graduate school, so I can do more of this and, change the world, right? So that was my whole story. You might want to pay for the first year, be prepared to pay for the first year or the first semester, and make sure that your application, cross your T's, and you have submitted before the due date. So a due date is not for you to relax and say, okay, it's March 15th. I'm going to relax. When it's March 15th, I'll open the internet and then I'll start submitting. A due date is simply basically you planning ahead, right? So I would say submit no longer than 2 weeks in advance, at least 2 weeks in advance of any due date that you see, because institutions will start reading applications as soon as they start receiving them. Where can you find funding? Number one place is on the website of each university. Yes, there might be a friend who will tell you about it. There might be an info session that you attend. But if it's not on the website of the university, this is where corresponding and networking comes into play. You want to ask, please, I didn't see this funding, but I heard, or there's this third-party website that shows that your school has funding. Could you confirm if indeed you have funding? And there are two other websites, fundingusstudy.org and Google is your best friend, okay? You can't go wrong with Google. Now, step number 3 is to complete your application. Many schools on their website will have the application forms and an application fee. If you want to receive an application fee waiver, I would encourage you to start communicating with schools, get on their mailing list. If they have information sessions, join those sessions. If they have fairs, join those fairs. There are many schools that will happily waive your fees, but they won't waive it if you're applying last minute, right? If they see that you're applying early, you have what it takes, you're communicating with them, you're a strong candidate, and the only barrier between you and applying is an application fee. Some schools have a budget for this. Your statement of purpose needs to be super strong. You can't not know why you are going to grad school. Why are you going? What are you going to accomplish? And what are you going to do with a degree in this field? That's what your statement of purpose should tell a school. What have you done in the past and how is this even connected? Standardized test scores, if you've taken it, if it's required, make sure that they're strong. A resume or CV, this also needs to be put together really well. Always start with a strong verb to explain what you have done. English test scores, if it's requested, your official academic records, which are your transcripts. So if you haven't graduated from school, you need to be able to get your transcripts out so that they can see how you have done academically and what your potential is for succeeding academically in the future. And of course, letters of recommendation. Many schools will ask for at least 2, some will ask for up to 3. Some will ask for letters from people who have taught you. If you've been out of school for a long time, some may accept 1 letter from a supervisor who you've been working with. But if you're going to grad school for a PhD, chances are that they want to see an academic letter recommendation or a letter of recommendation from an academic. What are the standardized tests that you might be taking? Again, like I said, it's optional. But, sorry, there's a typo, it should be graduates. So the graduate management admissions tests, mostly for those considering a master's or a PhD in a business or management or finance related field, and the GRE for everybody else, the graduate record exam for everybody else. Again, it's optional. Don't run and take the GRE or the GMAT until you're sure that the schools that you're applying to require it. If you're applying to 6 schools, and only 1 requires it, I would say maybe just skip taking it and then look for another school to replace that 6th one. You don't have to take the exam only for 1 school. But if your field is such that every school that you look at is requiring the GRE or the GMAT, please go ahead and take it. Prepare for it for you. You do. English proficiency test, most schools in the US, it's TOEFL. Some schools will take IELTS and some schools will take Duolingo. And these are common. Now, how can you evaluate your transcripts? ECE. But the body that has all the different credential evaluation, you can check them out because on some schools' website, you might see Spantran, you might see some other companies and you're not familiar with them. As long as you're on nurses.org, please go ahead and have them evaluate your transcript if that's what the school requires. Some key advice I'd love to share is keep educating yourself. So I said I'm a lifelong learner and I believe that there's nothing such as a jobless graduate. I graduated but I haven't been doing much. No. Between now and when you want to go to school in the US, Do everything you can to keep improving yourself. Number one, I would say aim for excellence in everything you're doing. You're writing university exams, make sure you're doing excellently well. Your online presence, don't be that person that when a school wants to admit you, they've interviewed you, they love you, they see everything wonderful about you, but then they go online to your social media and they're a bit like, ooh, this person might not be a good fit for us. Make sure you are cleaning up your online presence and putting your best foot forward. Your communication with schools, the emails you send, even to the graduate coordinator. I had students tell me how it was a graduate coordinator, some person that seems to be like a receptionist, that put in a good word for them to the professor that eventually offered them an assistantship position. So make sure you are communicating professionally at all times. Then be patient with yourself. I know LinkedIn is where everybody goes to sort of brag, but avoid comparison and the pressure to have it all figured out. Some people have been applying for years. You are just starting your journey. Don't feel work. They can't hire you. They're not hiring you. Nobody wants to pay you to do X, but you know you need experience to do X. Volunteer. Do an internship. Take online courses. Improve yourself, okay? Engage in leadership activity on your resume, because no school wants to admit that person who's super smart and your claim to fame is that you're smart and there's nothing else you do outside of the classroom. And stay open-minded and optimistic. I know some people are fixated on a school name. If it's not the name of the school, or if it's not the school, I'm not going, and you'll be shocked that there are no-name brand schools you probably never heard of, that have money in your field, but because you are maybe so fixated on a particular name, you haven't even given them an option, or you haven't even opened your heart to think about applying there. I would also say that before you go to grad school, I would highly recommend that you consider working for a few years so that you can even really understand what it is you want to do. Because I've seen a lot of people go on to get a second master's, a third master's.
Hello, everyone. It seems that Chinenye has lost her her internet connection, and I certainly apologize for that. I know that you've been getting lots and lots of really good information. One of the things that she was talking about just before the internet went out is how important it is to do your research, and even more importantly, be willing to consider schools you have never heard of. With so many choices, there are going to be lots and lots of fine institutions out there that you will benefit from, and you have the potential to succeed following a degree from that school that you have never heard of. Chinenye, I was just jumping in and emphasizing the importance of really being willing to give those schools that, as you say, people have never heard of, a chance. I think you're muted, maybe.
Thank you so much. I apologize for my poor network.
Don't worry. You're
I'm
back.
Thank
That's
you. All righty. So now what are some of these funding opportunities? One that I would highly recommend is the Knight Hennessy Stanford program, Scholars Program. It's fully funded. So they fund your degree program, your graduate degree for up to 3 years. And I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to apply for. You obviously have to apply to Stanford as well. The American Association of University Women, they give you between 20,000 to I think 50,000, if I'm not mistaken, for either a master's or a PhD. So this was the fellowship I got that helped me pay for graduate school. And the Schlumberger Foundation Faculty for the Future is also another program for women, especially women in STEM. If you're thinking of a PhD, this is a program that I encourage you to look into because there is funding. And they're always looking for people from the global south. I think we're underrepresented, and I think it's something for you to definitely consider. The MasterCard Foundation also has funding. MasterCard Foundation, they give generous funding or financial aid to Africans. They have a scholars program. For your master's degree, you must be below the age of 35. And all the universities on their list have their own eligibility criteria. But MasterCard Foundation program is right now available at UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. And I encourage anyone who's interested in getting a fully paid master's to probably think of applying, because they don't just sponsor you to go to school, they mentor you for life. All right. And it's a really phenomenal option for you to pay for graduate school. If you're thinking you're not going to make it to the US or you don't want to leave the continent, Carnegie Mellon University in Africa is also one of the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program institutions. It's an American school. There's no loss in value, phenomenal engineering programs that they have. That's something for you to also check out. Now, EducationUSA has a program that allows or helps you to cover the application costs. Because when we're saying apply to graduate school, there are costs that can sometimes seem prohibitive, or you just think about, oh, you have to pay this and pay this and pay that, and you just sort of give up. Don't give up, because there are many organizations besides even EducationUSA. I mean, Michael Taiwo, iScholars, these are all organizations trying to cover the cost of applications. But the difference between EducationUSA and these other organizations is we are looking for high-achieving low-income students, but we don't just pay your application costs. Now, if a school in the United States admits you with full funding, we'll also cover the cost of your visa, your CVIS fee, your flight ticket, and we'll even give you a travel allowance. So we are with you every step of the way to ensure that you get to the US and that you are successful. The website is below. The application cycle opens in a few weeks, March 15th. But in the meantime, before you even apply, I would say check out the website and read the profiles of other scholars who have gone ahead of you. You'll see that it's a program that you can also get into if you are really ready and you put in a solid application. We also run a membership program for students who want to study in the US, because I know that I can't finish or do justice to this topic today. So I encourage you, I'm not going to read out what we do, but I would say just reach out to any of the EducationUSA centers in Nigeria. We have a general orientation every Wednesday by 10. And you can definitely connect with us on our website. You can send us an email. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel if you want to learn more about studying the US through an EducationUSA center. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your paying attention, and I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chinenye. That was really amazing. So we will move now to the Q&As part of segment, and we'll just share the screen so that we can present some of the questions that we've collated in advance.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you, Chineye Owadilike, for that insightful presentation. It was very informative. We all appreciate you for sharing your valuable knowledge and expertise with us. Now it's time for the question and answer session, like Ms. Victoria said, where you can engage directly with our experts, Ms. Chineye Owadilike and Ms. Diane West. We have curated a variety of questions from the participants prior to the meeting, which our speakers will
Looks like Deborah is having issues with her connection, so I will just go ahead to read some of the questions. We've grouped them into three major sections. We have questions around the application process. I think that you've done an excellent job, Chineye, to cover that. We also have questions around funding and also recommendations. So we'll start with the application process. So someone is asking that they currently have a higher national diploma, HND, in mass communication. Can this be used to study for a master's or even for postgraduates? They need insight on how to pursue their education growth. There is also a question around GPA in the application process. Some say that it is important. I think I would like to help this person rephrase. Some people who don't have a very strong GPA, I would like to ask to Diane and Chineye, do they still have a chance in getting a fully funded program? There's also a question also whether the IELTS is compulsory for anyone seeking a master's scholarship in the US. And also somebody is asking specifically, what are the features of a good statement of purpose? I will just hand over to Diane and Chineye to take these questions.
So thank you. Thank you for the question. So for the student who has a HND, it is possible to proceed from a HND to a master's or postgraduate diploma. However, it depends on the class of your degree, like how well you did, your final GPA. I've seen students with upper credits with distinction get into a master's program seamlessly. I've also seen students with upper credit and distinction be stopped by school and they've asked for a credential evaluation. So I think the first step is to see if you can convert your degree to a US equivalency and see what GPA they convert it to. That's what I would say should be the first thing you do before you think of applying for a master's degree abroad. What's the place of the CGPA in the application process? If it's low, can you still get full funding? It depends. If it's low and you haven't done anything to sort of improve yourself, to show that you are beyond what happened during your undergraduate degree, then no, you're not going to get full funding. I'm sorry to be the breaker of the bad news. But if it's low and you've gone on to improve yourself in your field, to gain work experience, to build yourself, to show that, look, what happened during my undergraduate degree was just a mistake. Maybe there was an incident that made my GPA fall or something. That schools will not penalize you because you did badly. They will penalize you that you did badly and you haven't done anything to do better. So if you can improve yourself significantly, such that your experience even maybe outweighs whatever GPA you got, then schools will be looking at that experience. Full funding is hard for everyone. A stronger GPA helps you much more than a lower GPA. I'm going to say it as it is. But then you can go beyond that. I have seen a student with a 2.2 get into a school fully funded, but this 2.2 wasn't their stopping point. They had a 2.2, they went and they got a postgraduate diploma. They did the postgraduate diploma, worked for many years, I think up to 7 years. So with all of that, the schools were convinced that this person can do graduate level work. Okay, because in graduate school, they actually expect you to get A's. in Nigeria where you're getting a C and that's acceptable. They expect you to get A's, maybe B's, but C's, I don't know. Is the IELTS one, research your options. Some schools will require it. Some schools will say it's optional. I always say English is the official language in our country. If a school says that they require an English proficiency exam, any English proficiency exam, you want to find out if you can get around it by showing that you've been studying in English all your life. What are the features of a good statement of purpose? It has a strong why. It is storified, like it's memorable, like they're going to be reading hundreds, if not thousands of statements of purpose. So they're not going to want to read something that AI wrote. They're not going to want to read something that you copied and pasted off of a website or something. They're going to want to read your own story. So it's how you tell your story, right? And I'm thinking about the story that I told, story of being in Benue State, which had the highest rate of HIV/AIDS in the country, and me just wanting to do development work. Had I worked with HIV/AIDS patients before? No. But my intentions, my why, my little experience was what I brought into my statement of purpose to show them that this was really something that I wanted to do. And I think if you write and your story makes sense, and there is a connection between either what you've studied and what you want to study, or where you have worked, your work experience and what you want to study, then that makes a bit of sense. And then what you would do with the degree eventually. I hope that answers those questions.
And I might jump in here and add, in terms of the statement of purpose, one of the things that the schools are looking at as they read your statement of purpose is this: do I want this student to be an alum of my university? Will this student be a good alumna or alumna of my school, right? And so your story, what you're telling them and what you hope to do will be critical. Because especially if you're applying for the PhD, institutions want to think about, oh, we'd be so proud to have this student among our alumni. So try to also keep that in mind as you're writing. The other thing is that there'll be a word limit. And so in that, you need to really spend time with the key factors about why you want to study. You can share a bit about your background, but it's really about where you are now and how this degree will help you move forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Diane. Thank you very much, Ms. Chineye, for the answers. You answered our questions beautifully. Now over to the questions in the funding segment. The first question we have here is, I have secured admission to a master's program in the US. How can I secure a scholarship or funding to achieve this goal? The second question says, can a Nigerian already living in the US get a fully funded scholarship in the US? Well, the last question in this segment is, what are the must-haves to qualify for a fully funded scholarship at the master's and PhD?
Why don't I start with the first question, Chineye, and I'll leave the other two for you.
All righty.
Yeah. Well, I think this first question really shows that the person has not followed the EducationUSA philosophy. A student should never apply to a school that cannot provide them the funding. It's all well and good to get admitted, but that is not how we suggest you apply. As you heard earlier in Chineye's presentation, you should make sure that you apply to a school that can meet both your academic and your financial needs. So if a school tells you that they have an average funding of $20,000, but the program is $50,000 and you can afford $5,000, you shouldn't have applied to that school. It's really that simple. You need to do the math. And so we see this about this time of year in our centers all over the region, all over the world, frankly. People think they've done what they need to get in, but then they don't have the funding and they think that will be easy. One thing to add here, we know that there are two primary sources of funding for students. The first is themselves and their families, and the second is the institution. Yes, there are outside scholarships. You've learned some things about that, but that's not what I want you to be counting on. Chinene, over to you.
Thank you. So can a Nigerian already living in the US get a fully funded scholarship in the US? Yes, absolutely. But it depends on what they're doing in the US. So if you're there on a B1, B2 visa, you went to visit, then you probably would need to come back to get the correct visa to, be there as a student. So it's possible to apply and be admitted. You just need to make sure you're regularizing your visa and getting the correct visa to remain there as a student. Then what are the must-haves to qualify for a fully funded scholarship at the master's and PhD level? So I'll just sort of go back to my slide and say that many schools are looking at you holistically. You might have graduated with a first class, but then nothing else, your GPA is fantastic, but that's it. You've never worked. You have zero experience. You haven't even applied to the right schools. You just feel like, so I had this best graduating student 1 year from LASU, best graduating in the entire university. And that year he applied to many schools in the US and none admitted him. Everywhere, rejection, rejection, rejection. So when I looked at his resume, I realized that his only claim to fame was his GPA. That's it. He went to school, he did well, period. But schools are looking at everything beyond just you academically because they have funding. They want to know, like Ms. Diane mentioned, are you the kind of alum that they want at the end of the day? What have you done outside of the classroom? What are you engaged in? Is your resume telling us that you will be excellent? Is your statement of purpose explaining why you want a master's or a PhD? Do you, are you likely to succeed? Are your letters of recommendation strong enough? A weak letter of recommendation, a half-baked letter of recommendation, a letter of recommendation that is not glowing about what you've done and who you are is worse than no letter of recommendation at all. So if you're going to get a letter of recommendation that will not blow your trumpet and toot your horn and really tell schools that you are the best thing, this best kind of candidate to admit, then I would say just maybe find someone who will go all out for you. But schools are reading everything about your application to determine if you're the kind of person that they want. In fact, I had a student once graduated with the first class, environmental sciences, amazing student. She had done her bachelor's, she had done her master's. PhD schools were looking at her, she was looking at them. The only reason they didn't admit her was her letter of recommendation didn't come in. And the schools got back to her and said, we want you, but we can't admit you because the person who supervised your master's thesis has nothing to say about you. Like, we didn't see their letter of recommendation. So I would say a holistic application, the whole you, everything has to be popping, everything has to be phenomenal, everything has to be, like I say, exceptional. You don't want to make sure you've dotted all your I's, you've crossed all your T's. That's what schools that give full funding are looking for. And then applying to the right schools. Some people are fundable, but they're looking at the wrong schools for them. They're looking at the big names. They're looking at the ones that when you look at rankings, they're the top 20, top 50. But then there are some schools in North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Idaho, all those places that nobody thinks of that have funding. They want you, but then you haven't even bothered to apply. So it's the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. Thank you very much, Ms. Chinyere, for the beautiful answers. Now we are going to move on to the third segment of questions, which is the recommendation. Firstly, I would like to ask for an extension in the time so as to take some other questions in the chat box. But the questions in the recommendation segment are, the first question is, securing compelling recommendation letters can be a significant hurdle for aspiring graduate students. How can one navigate this process, particularly for individuals who did not cultivate established relationships with the lecturers prior to completing their studies, but have
I think Deborah might be having some connection issues, but I think Diane and Chinenye got the question. How can someone who did not build a relationship with their lecturers, how can they still get compelling recommendation letters? What other alternatives are there? And there's a second question here, whether one can use someone who is a PhD degree holder as a recommender if you have a relationship with them as an academic mentor. Basically, can you use somebody else who is also a student? And also, what are the chances of using organizations that you volunteered for, which are not directly related to your field of study, as a recommender? If you're working with an organization that's working on cancer prevention, but what you are studying has nothing to do with that, how might that still be useful for your course of study? I will hand over to Diane and Chinenye to respond.
So I'm happy to start. The first question you've already heard a lot about from Chinenye. Those letters of recommendation are super, super important. Now, the situation described here is a tough one, but it's not an uncommon one. The thing I would suggest is that students go back, think about who the lecturers were, that they did really, so a course or two they did really well in with a particular lecturer, and go back and talk to that professor again, kind of reintroduce yourself, if you will, and see then after doing that and sharing your resume. It's always good to take a resume when you're trying to get a letter of recommendation. See if the person would then be willing to write a letter. Even if you hadn't cultivated the relationship individually while you were a student, the professor may still remember you. The other thing, though, that's important in a situation like that is to say to the faculty member, will you be able to write a positive letter of recommendation for me? Give them the chance to say no. I know that's not the tendency in Nigeria, but do everything you can to make sure that you're going to get a good letter from that faculty member. Again, my main point here is just try to get to know them again, because you are going to need an academic letter of recommendation, as you heard from Chinenye earlier. In some cases, one of your letters may be able to come from an employer, but you're gonna have to have an academic one. I've kind of dipped into the second question, but go ahead, Chinenye.
Absolutely, I agree with everything that Ms. Diane has said, but I would also just add, practically, this is 2024. And the beauty about living in the world right now is that you have technology to play with. So when I went to grad school, I had to travel all the way from Benue to Nsukka to ask for letters of recommendation. I would sit outside the door of my lecturers' offices, waiting for hours for them to attend to me. Now, you all have phones, you have laptops, you have email addresses, and these lecturers also have these communication methods. So look for a current student, connect with that current student, ask them to help you get the professor or the lecturer's number and email, and open a line of communication. How do you do this? Start with thanking them for teaching you whilst you were a university student. Not many students remember to come back and say thank you, right? But when you do, what happens is that, oh, they might not even remember who in the world you are, but you couldn't even probably add a picture. If there's any picture that you ever took with this lecturer or professor, you could add that at the bottom of your email and just say, oh, I hope you remember me. Just sort of open that channel of communication. And then when you do, when you do, find out key dates where you can continue the communication. So in Nigeria, we tell everybody Happy New Month. You can find out what this person's birthday is. If they're Christian, maybe you send them a Happy Easter message. If they're Muslim, maybe you send them a, Eid al-Fitr or Eid al whatever message. You make sure that you are in touch. And don't just send a message. Come on, you're now a graduate, you're earning money. Send them some airtime, say, you just thought of them and you just wanted to send them, something just to recharge their phone or something. There is nobody you give a gift to. And then maybe 3-4 months down the line, you say, please, can you consider writing a letter of recommendation, a positive letter of recommendation for me? And the person will say, nah, that person must really be a mean person. So you don't just want to storm into the person's world and, you call them today, then tomorrow you say, I need a letter of recommendation. You want to sort of butter them up, wet the ground so that when you do ask for a letter of recommendation, they're more likely to say yes. And then you want to obviously give them advance notice. So writing letters of recommendation is not their full-time job, right? They're doing you a favor. The worst thing you can do is to sort of just tell them at the last minute, you need a letter of recommendation by Monday. And today's Thursday, you're sending them a message. Nobody has that kind of time because you're probably going to think, and like Ms. Diane mentioned, you want to share with them a copy of your resume, a copy of your, maybe even statement of purpose, like some bullet points. You could even ask them if you could put together some bullet points of things you would like them to highlight. That's how you cultivate that relationship and then see it get you a letter of recommendation. Now, can one decide to use a PhD degree holder as a recommender if you have a relationship as an academic mentor? That's fine. That's fine. In fact, schools would tell you that it's better you get your letter of recommendation from someone who really knows you, as opposed to going all the way to the vice chancellor because the vice chancellor and your dad play golf or something. The vice chancellor doesn't even know you. He's never taught you anything or she's never taught you anything, but you're trying to look for who is more senior to write a letter that doesn't know you. It's better someone who knows you, who is in a field of study that is as related to what it is that you want to do, not someone who is in a completely different field, but because they just like you and your friends, you want them to write that letter. That also goes, excuse me, to the second question, which says, what are your chances of using organizations you've volunteered for, which are not directly related to your field of study as a recommender? And I'll go back to step one, which is research your options. Schools more often than not will tell you how many letters of recommendation they want. And if it's a very prestigious or very competitive program, they will tell you who they want that letter from. So some schools will tell you they want it to be from a professor who has taught you. Some will tell you, maybe if you're going into a field that is not so academic, like an MBA program, they might tell you they want it from a supervisor. Now, if you've gone to school for at least 4 years and there is no one academic person who can write a letter of recommendation for you, then that's a problem. That's a problem. If they have given you the option of submitting an additional 3rd or 4th recommendation, and you want to get it from someone who is in a different field that can show a different side of you, that's a different ballgame. But if they have specifically said, someone who supervised your master's thesis or your bachelor's degree project, someone who supervised a research you've worked on, and you're leaving all those people to go to one NGO where you work for a food bank and you did something completely unrelated, it shows that, you're not ready for that program or to be admitted to that program. So chances are low. That's the bottom line. Chances are low.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chineye. Thank you very much, Ms. Diane, for answering these questions. We have some questions in the chat box. I don't know if there are some specific questions you would like to do us the honor of answering before we bring this meeting to a close. For instance, there is a question on visa interviews in the chat box. Is there any you'd like to answer?
So I'm happy to comment. What do visa officers look out for in an F1 visa interview? In a very, very basic way, they want to see that you have a plan to study in the US and then to return back home. You all are looking to apply to master's degrees. That automatically means you're a more focused student and should be able to explain that very well. It's also really important that you have done all the work yourself so that you know the answers to the questions that you're going to be asked. The other thing I would encourage you to do is connect to the Education USA advising centers throughout Nigeria, because we will have pre-departure orientation sessions where consular officers will come and speak. And so you can hear directly from the people who will be interviewing, maybe not the same person who would interview you, but people who are doing this work day in and day out. Come prepared. Know that you're going to be speaking to an American, and Americans really appreciate direct eye contact and your firm, confident statements about your plan and what you're going to do. I will tell you, some people will say, oh, no one ever gets a visa from Nigeria. It's impossible. But I tell you, it's not impossible, because there are over 17,000 Nigerians that studied in the United States last year, number 7 in the whole world. So you definitely have the potential to get that student visa, and I wish you all the best. Anything you want to add to that, Chinene?
No, you did amazing.
Thanks.
But I would just add, if you are interested in a visa orientation, we will usually post that on our Instagram or Facebook pages. We'll announce when there is a visa orientation, and we're hoping to do all our visa orientations this year hybrid style. So if you can't make it into the center, then you'll be able to log on via Zoom, at least to listen to what the consular officer is saying.
Great plan. That's perfect.
I would
Thank
like
you.
to answer. Thank you. I would like to answer the question by Adeze. I'm a final year student with a CGPA of 4.38 on a 5-point scale, studying peace and conflict studies, and I have about 4 years of experience as a software product manager. Is it possible for me to pivot from social sciences to a STEM field? Can I also apply now for fall 2025 if I have my unofficial transcripts? You're a final year student, so you haven't completed your degree. I would say it's a bit maybe premature, because schools will want to see that final transcript. Also, because you're pivoting, that 1 year or extra 2 years will give you the opportunity to build your experience even further, or even take some classes to show that if you're put into a master's program in a STEM field, you can cope. So yes, you have the relevant experience, and that's amazing, but you also have the theoretical knowledge of how these things work. So I would say use maybe the next 1 or 2 years to build yourself, so that you can show that, yes, you have the interest, yes, you have the experience, but you also have the technical know-how. Like if you were in a classroom, the professor would not have to explain everything to you because you didn't have a bachelor's degree in that field. Have I seen someone go from non-STEM to STEM? Maybe one in my entire career, right? But it's not impossible. I think the road will be a bit more difficult for you because you're competing with those who probably have a bachelor's in computer science and also have that experience. You're competing with them, right? You're literally competing with them, because at the graduate level, schools are not admitting 20, 30 people. They're probably admitting, a handful. So for you to be competitive and show that you are a competitive student, make sure that you are getting, you can take online classes in that field that you're thinking of going into to show that you have, again, the theoretical knowledge. You already have the experience, which is fantastic, but schools are also going to want to interview you to be sure that you can do what it is you say you can do. It's not impossible. It's just going to be a bit more difficult. But I would say maybe think of fall 2026. By then, you would have graduated, you would have built your experience, and you'll be a stronger candidate. That's my feedback.
Thank you very much, Chineye. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Diane. We are very grateful for your expert level knowledge and experience that you shared with us today. I think everyone on the call is feeling super grateful as well to be able to learn so much. I think right about now, we will bring the session to a close and just want to say how grateful we are, the entire team at One African Child, for taking the time to share your experience with us. And also just encouraging everyone, part of what we are doing is all about, taking initiative. So don't let this be the last thing you do and expect that you automatically just achieve all your dreams. You have to be proactive. Now that you've heard from Education USA, if you're in Nigeria, follow Education USA Lagos or Nigeria on social media platforms so that you can stay up to date. Chineye also shares some exciting opportunity that Education USA offers, with supporting your application process and all of that. Education USA is directly linked to the